Hello, my name is Felice Caivano, and I'm an artist and an educator. I teach at Holyoke Community College in the Visual Art Department. And here in Wistariahurst, I have an installation of 3 separate pieces. These small pieces here on the wall, a very large piece called Uncredited that we'll probably talk about in a minute, and another one over here called When. So this project is all about women's work. And I was really happy to have this installation here during Women's History Month at Wistariahurst. And I was also really pleased to bring the work here because the Skinner family, of course, produced threads. They were silk threads, but these pieces were made mostly with cotton thread. So it all began with this piece right here called Vote. And in 2018, I was invited to be in an exhibition simply called Vote. And it was at midterm elections, as you know, we're here now at midterm elections again. And I thought about what it was that I wanted to make. And we were also coming up on the 100th year anniversary of women's right to vote. So I thought I would combine the two and simply use the word vote. So I searched for a doily that, because I was thinking of women's work, that was maybe 100 years old, and I've since found out this one isn't 100 years old. And on it, I embroidered the word vote in a typeface that I thought was from the 20s. And I picked French knots for 2 reasons. One is that they're my favorite knots. They're my favorite embroidery stitches, rather. And the other is that they're the most labor intensive. So I was thinking about women's work and labor and the right to vote and how that's very much our work. So it all began here. And once I completed this work, and I was holding that doily for so long, stitching it, and of course I washed it and ironed it, I began to think about who made this piece. Why was it made? And just the history of embroidery and lace has always fascinated me. So I began thinking. And before I knew it, I wanted to create a piece that's here in the room called Uncredited that would fill the walls of a space and would represent a lot of work by many, many different women. And my search was to find doilies made here in the US by immigrant women, because I was curious about what stories they might have had, what they brought with them, you know, their cultural heritage, how they brought the needlework here to the States, how they often found jobs, especially at the turn of the century, in factories and in industries. So I quietly began collecting doilies, and it turned into this obsession. It turned into a passion. So in this room, there are hundreds of doilies. And it was important for me also to find doilies with blank centers, because that empty fabric center represented the anonymous woman that made the piece, the unknown maker. So I was doing that, and at the same time, I thought about more seriously about women's work, and I created the piece over here called When. And When is in the form of a large $sign, and it represents the wages that women make and have made compared to men since the Equal Pay Act of 1963. So the doilies move around that $sign, starting with 58.9 cents or 58.9% per dollar, however you want to state it, and they move around and they go up and down. So as I did this, most of this I embroidered during COVID, and I would just each day pick up a doily. Sometimes the doily would take a couple of days to complete. And I selected threads that, for me, represented money. There, you'll see that there's copper, silver, gold threads, because I just wanted it to seem like money. And then every once in a while, I'd be plowing through this very slowly, and I'd see that, 75.5 cents. We're still at 75.5. So there are occasions where I'd use very, very pale thread, like off-white or beige, so that you could barely see that amount of money. So these 3 pieces make up everything that's in this room.
When you mention the different immigrant women who came and worked making these doilies.
Mm-hmm.
Which were the most common backgrounds that you could find or identify throughout your research?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I always worried I was leaving someone out. And there's no way to tell. I'm not a textile historian, specifically the origins of the style, but I've looked at enough doilies and began reading enough that it seems like just about every group of people have some kind of needlework, and that was then transferred here. And of course changed for different reasons. There were different waves of immigration before 1900 and after 1900, but certainly in this area, lots of Irish Americans, Italian Americans, South Americans. There's work by as far away in here, traditions that I can trace to the Tenerife Islands in Spain, to, lace was made everywhere, from Asia to the Middle East and Armenia and, just about everywhere. And it was really interesting when I gave a talk here. There's a piece out in the hallway where anybody can write memories of their ancestors on these paper lace doilies. And one woman wrote a story of her grandmother who in the 1940s in Puerto Rico made only, I think it says 12 cents a day, embroidering and making lace on lingerie for the wealthy. And that's just astounding to me, 12 or 14 cents a day in the 40s. And her quote on the doily goes on to say that when her grandmother moved in with her here in Massachusetts, of course she continued doing the needlework. I know in my own family, my background is Italian on all sides of the family. Everybody did some kind of needlework. And the lace crochet was on the edges of just about everything.
The message that is embedded in the pieces that you have in this exhibit is one of empowerment, one of advocacy. Mm-hmm. That is an ongoing battle and struggle.
Right.
What will be the takeaway you would like for the public visiting your exhibit to get mm-hmm. from seeing this beautiful handcraft work?
I'd like them to wonder who made these things, who the women were, what their histories were, as I might have mentioned earlier, what they brought with them when they came to the States. I'd really like them to see it as a thing, as taking the everyday, ordinary, mundane, because from the turn of the century all the way through the 50s, and people are still making doilies, these things were everywhere. But somehow taking that mundane object that no one cares about anymore and no one values, and seeing it in this other or new light, taking the ordinary and making it a little bit extraordinary. So I want them to see that, or maybe think about it or understand that. And the other thing is, what was the other thing? As I did this, I had such intention about what I was doing, but I never expected that the accumulation of all of these pieces would be so beautiful, just the objects themselves. So to give an audience a little bit of beauty to look at is another, as you say, takeaway. So those are the things that I was thinking about, and I would hope happen as viewers see this work. I often wonder if all of these makers were here, if all the women were here that made these pieces, really what they would say, what the conversation would be in this room, what it would sound like. So I think about that a lot. And every time I touch a doily, I just wonder about the stories.